Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us. My name is Brian Elaine. I'm here today with our great friend, Lisa Sharon Harper, a prolific speaker, writer, and activist. Lisa is the founder and president of freedomroad.us, a consulting group dedicated to shrinking the narrative gap in our nation by designing forums and experiences that bring common understanding, common commitment, and common action. Lisa is the author of several books, including the recent Fortune, How Race Broke My Family and the World, and How to Repair It All. And I hope you've seen our interview on that. She also wrote other books, including Evangelical Does Not Equal Republican or Democrat, Left, Right, and Christ, Evangelical Faith and Politics, and the critically acclaimed The Very Good Gospel, How Everything Wrong Can Be Made Right, which was recognized as the 2016 Book of the Year by the Englewood Review of Books. Lisa's also contributed a chapter in our How to Heal Our Divides, Volume 2, An Abundance of Opportunities. A columnist at Sojourners Magazine and Auburn Theological Seminary, senior fellow, Lisa and her writing have appeared in many international media outlets, including CNN, National Civic Review, Huffington Post, Relevant Magazine, and Essence Magazine. In 2015, the Huffington Post named Lisa one of 50 powerful women religious leaders. And in 2019, the Religion Communicators Council named a two-part series within Lisa's Freedom Road podcast as Best Radio or Podcast Series of the Year. You can learn more about all of Lisa's work at lisasharonharper.com. So Lisa, as always, it's an honor and privilege to be here with you. Thanks so much for taking some time to join us.
Absolutely. I'm so excited for this conversation. So thank you. Thank you for having me. Appreciate it. And it's an honor.
So for those of you joining us live, feel free to ask questions by raising your hand through the Zoom portal or asking your questions through the chat window, and we'll try to get to those. But perhaps, Lisa, maybe you can catch us up on what you've been up to lately.
Oh, my goodness. Well, it's been a year since we were, I think we got together last February. And
Yeah.
if not, it was, wow, it's been a year. First of all, I want to say thank you so much to you, Brian, and to this community for helping to launch Fortune into the world. It really did make an impact. People are still reading it. And I want to encourage you, if you can, to continue to share it with your friends. It's beginning to actually have resonance on a local level. So as you know, most of our push last year was federal because we were hoping to press the president to include the call for reparations into his State of the Union address, which is coming up again very soon. And you might remember he didn't do that, but he did listen. And there are ways that the initiatives that he's putting forward right now or wants to put forward and actually did before this last Congress was elected into Congress, which makes it very hard, quite honestly, in the House. The things that he is pushing, actually, some of them actually are connected to some of the things that the African-American community has been calling for. Especially the George Floyd and policing, the Policing Act that was named after George Floyd. That, and especially with the recent killing of Mr. Nichols and in his funeral that we just saw yesterday, there's a way that the Tyree's death has actually brought this back to the fore and has made it possible. Now that act, that legislation, is a piece, a small piece, but yet a piece of the kind of repair that the African-American community would be calling for with regard to reparation. It's not all of it by far, but it's one piece, and it is a piece that Congress is trying to push through right now, and that the president is trying to push through Congress right now. So that said, actual reparations and truth-telling initiatives are actually beginning to spring up all over the place in local areas. Because Congress, our federal government, is kind of at a standstill now that we have a divided government, a lot of this work is moving to localities. So, for example, I was recently contacted by the HR 40 coalition here in Philadelphia to see if there's a way to partner. And actually, they're thinking here in Philadelphia of putting together a task force to discern what repair would look like here. Now, I am so excited for that. And if you've read Fortune, there's a lot of repair to be done in the city of Philadelphia because my family story was there and I was able to kind of mine some of the brokenness that was created by the construct of race here. So the fact that this is happening, that the mayor's office is calling for this, is a very big deal. Those kinds of initiatives are happening all over the country. I would really encourage you to consult with your church. Ask your own church, how are there ways that you as a church can begin the process of truth seeking, truth listening, and truth telling? And unto reparation. What would reparation look like? And what could it look like for you? Begin to be in conversation with the African American and other injured communities in your locale, and ask them what would it require for the things that race broke to be fixed, to be repaired. So those are just a few of the things. We are actually just coming off of the National Day of Racial Healing and Reconciliation. That was January 17th. And so now we're literally, 2 days into Black History Month again. So it's an opportunity for everyone to refocus and begin to ask that question of repair again, like you're doing today.
So for folks who are not familiar with HR 40, that is a bill meant to establish a commission to study and develop reparation proposals for African Americans, and
That's
was
right.
sponsored by Sheila Jackson Lee. Can you tell folks just a little bit more about that?
Sure. It's actually been introduced into every Congress for the last, I believe, the last 40 years, since the 1980s. And it began to be introduced into Congress by an African-American legislator, I believe in the Midwest. And then when he passed away recently, Sheila Jackson Lee took up the mantle and began to introduce it into every Congress. HR stands for House Resolution 40 is named after the 40 acres and a mule that people of African descent were originally promised after the end of slavery, that each person who has been enslaved will receive 40 acres and a mule in order to set them up. That had been not an abnormal thing. It actually was a normal practice in territories that held slaves. Mexico did that, and other regions that had enslaved people. Jamaica did that. Other places did that. Offered reparation and restitution in order to help people to get on their feet, because it's in the interest of the entire society that all of its citizens, all of its people have a shot, have an ability to contribute to the economic well-being of the entire of the whole. So, but in America, we made the promise and didn't do it. So HR 40 is a way for us to make good on that promise.
So also, can you tell folks about the work that you do with Freedom Road?
Absolutely. Well, Freedom Road is a consulting group and also an educational group. So we have an institute that we developed in the middle of the lockdown, the COVID lockdown, which really wasn't a lockdown, but you understand what I'm saying. We offer webinars and growth communities there and opportunities for you just to download information and learn, basically kind of get up to speed on different things so that you can engage in the work of transforming our nation and our world into a more just space and a more just world. So the Institute is there, but actually I have to say that Freedom Road exists to help organizations and institutions to do justice more justly. And our primary strategy for that is actually to address the narrative gap, the gap between the stories that we tell ourselves about ourselves and the truth, and also just the gap between our various stories. This gap is the cause of the conflict and the division in our nation today. So our strategy is to work within institutions, also through pilgrimage, training, cohorts, consulting, to shrink that narrative gap. And we do that in various ways. One way that I'm so excited about that's starting today actually is an initiative that is bringing together institutions to begin to interrogate their own narratives and ask the question, how has the narrative we have shown, we have been telling about ourselves, how has it squashed some of the truth? How has it covered up marginalized truth? How has it contributed to the division in our nation today? So that's actually a 3-year project that we're working on with the Carter Center, and it launches today. So that's very, very
That's
exciting.
fantastic.
Yeah.
So do you think you'll have any meetings coming up with the College Board to talk to them about their AP
Oh my gosh.
program?
Probably not anytime soon. But it is that's a great,
Talk
it's a
about
really,
needing to close the
yeah.
narrative gap, right?
Oh my gosh, right? I mean, that's the whole thing that's happening in Florida and actually in southern states and Midwestern states all over the country, is an explicit war on the truth. And
Yeah.
I think that that's literally a war against the kingdom of God. It's literally a declaration of war against God because Jesus says, I am the truth. And so if you squash truth, you're squashing Jesus. If you cover up truth or twist truth, you are covering up and twisting Jesus. And Jesus was the king of the kingdom of God. So there's no way for us to say that we are followers of Jesus and yet ban information, truth from entering into the world just because it's inconvenient or makes you uncomfortable. That's basically saying that Jesus is making you uncomfortable and you're banning Jesus from the world.
I mean, it's just almost hard for me to believe that they're getting away with this, at least
I
so far.
know.
I
I
mean,
know.
I really hope that there's a groundswell in various forms that turns us back.
Yeah. I do too. But I have to say, I think it really is about electoral politics at this point. I mean, the
Mhm.
reality is that he's the governor. DeSantis is the governor of Florida. And as the governor, he has the ability, he has found loopholes in his structures and ways that things work that he has leveraged in order to get his agenda across. And I think that the thing that we all need to learn from this, I think we thought, and sociologists even said that evangelicals don't understand systems or structures and how they work. That's not true because evangelicals have been leveraging systems and structures incredibly strategically over the last 7 years. We've seen that to be the case. I just think that what's really true and what also sociologists are beginning to discover is that evangelicals are more committed to, and that's not all evangelicals, it's white evangelicals. And in particular, um, well, there's a whole sociological study about that. I'll let that one speak for itself. But just to say that white evangelicals, according to this study, are more committed, generally speaking, to their whiteness than to Jesus. And so as a result, um, they are the largest supporters of a DeSantis governorship and maybe even presidential run. And they are not checking him because he's doing what they want him to do. So there's more of us than there are of them, quite honestly.
Mhm.
By us, I mean people of actual faith, in actual God, in maybe even in a growing realization of actual Jesus, and also other faiths and people of no faith, people who are just principled people. There are more of us than there are of them. And so there's the ability every election cycle to elect the world that we would like to see, a more inclusive and just world, one where the image of God is safe and where the image of God is protected and able to flourish in everyone. Um, and we really do need to focus on getting out that vote in 2024.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. So, I've kind of had a feeling since around 2016 that things are going to get worse before they get better.
Mhm.
And we've seen that, I think, on multiple
Yeah.
dimensions. Do you think, do you see any signs, I guess I should say, that we're ready to turn the corner, that things are getting better, or do you think still things are still downhill trajectory?
I don't think there's only one thing happening. I see things happening on several different planes. Like and by planes, I literally mean like, on the ground in local areas, I actually see a lot of people engaging and doing some really awesome things. I see white evangelical churches trying. I met several white evangelical megachurch pastors in Texas and in the South yesterday who told me about the different initiatives they're trying to do in order to make sure that people are not poor in their areas, in order to make sure that even to challenge some of these educational laws that are being passed in Texas and other places. So I see on a local level, there are people who are trying. I also see on a state level, I see an amazing new round of people who are, raising their hand and running for mayor and running for governor, running for local elected positions because they see that there are gaps. And they also see that if they don't run, somebody else might run, and you might actually get an election denier, an insurrectionist in that role. And that is also happening. So that's happening in locales like Minnesota and Michigan. You can see actually in very local areas, they've actually flooded legislative positions with those kinds of ideological bents. And that is a very scary thing for those local places. So I see multiple things happen. I see good stuff happening on a local level. I see bad stuff happening on a local level. I see I see on a federal level, we are going to be at a standstill really for the next 2 years. But I also see huge possibility for shift, beautiful, powerful shift in 2024. Again, if we are all mobilized for that vote. But what we see is we see the electorate just saying a resounding no to the politics of hate and the politics of division and saying enough is enough. Let's heal already. And that gives me hope.
I mean, it certainly is. Since I've been doing this How to Heal Our Divides effort, I keep finding more and more organizations that are doing really pragmatic, impactful things, to heal various types of divides. And they're growing, and there's more recognition of them. And all of that just seems positive to me. But, as you said, it's kind of right now a groundswell, which I think it ultimately is what it has to be in order to cause change at higher levels. But I don't think we're at that point of having enough change at the higher levels yet.
Can I also just say, I think another thing that's actually pretty amazing that I see God doing, because I just started my PhD, y'all. What? Yes, I did. I came back from 2 weeks in Amsterdam where thanks so much, Danielle. Appreciate the party. I came back from 2 weeks at the International Baptist Theological Study Center, which is connected with Free University or Frei University there, what they call the VU in Amsterdam. And so it's this Baptist, it's really kind of the center of the Baptist faith. The very first Baptist church in the world is there in Amsterdam. I had no idea about that. And I'm not Baptist at all. I've never been Baptist. But I've been connected with organizations that are in my parachurch life, InterVarsity, Young Life a lot. They love, Southern Baptists in particular, love that space. And that was very much something I was soaking in and didn't even know it. And so what I am witnessing in that space and also in others is actually a call to go deeper in our thinking. And I don't just mean because I'm getting a PhD, that's my call. Yes, that is true. It's my call right now. But I think I actually see God doing something very amazing. I also have a friend who is a pundit. She's one of these people is a talking head on the news. And she is now actually moving into the seminary space because she's like, I need to go deeper. I'm just tired of this ping pong surface level analysis. And so I think there is something very interesting that I really can't put my finger on or name, but I'll just say God's up to something. God is really up to something right now. I'll also say that in Amsterdam at the Baptist Center, I heard a talk by Dr. Reggie Williams, who wrote the book Bonhoeffer's Black Jesus, that blew my mind. And he's not the originator of really any of the thoughts that he shared, but he brought them together in a way that decoded the matrix. Oh my gosh. Like I've never seen anybody do this, like, ever, not like that. Um, a lot of the things he talked about, I have talked about, but not with the depth of understanding that he brought to it as a, as an educator, a doctor, that kind of thing, the thing I'm working toward. And so I see a deeper analysis that rising and God moving people to go deeper that I think can really help us in a few years to begin to make deep shift in ways that we haven't been able to make up to this point because we haven't really truly understood the forces that we're up against. We haven't been able to name them. We've been able to point to them, but we really haven't been able to understand them in depth. And I think God is moving people to that level of understanding.
Well, that's really good to hear because there's been such a push of anti-intellectualism, anti-education that we've seen.
Right.
You
At the
know,
same time, that's so
like
true.
it's good to have smart people. I mean, just generally speaking.
Yeah.
And there was this one quote that Frederick Buechner wrote, that was essentially anything that's the most important thing can't be proven,
Mm.
right?
Hmm.
Whether it's God or love or whatever, you can't.
Hmm.
How do you prove these things, right?
Yeah, that's true.
And that's kind of gets to your point. We as humans are intellectually constrained, and
Hmm.
deeper thought is required on any front to make progress. So, I'm glad to hear what you're saying on that regard.
Yeah, thank you.
So let's go back to your book. A year ago, you were in the midst of launching your new book, Fortune. Can you talk a little bit about how that's gone since the launch, and tell people a little bit about the flavor of that book, what it's about?
Well, we actually had a really successful launch in terms of, it really did get out there into the church. A lot of people were reading the book last year. I think a lot of folks are beginning to pick it up again. Ironically, I think that right after Black Fortune Month last year, a lot of people began to pick up the Very Good Gospel again. And so the Very Good Gospel, which was the book that I wrote just before Fortune, actually began to take off even more than Fortune last year, which was so funny to me. I still don't really fully understand that, except to say that the Very Good Gospel really is the baseline. It's the theology that it's the baseline theology that I actually carried forward in Fortune. And I've come to understand now that there's this whole thing called biography as theology. And so I was actually doing theology in Fortune as well. I just didn't understand that that's what I was doing. Now I understand that. And I was carrying forward the work of the Very Good Gospel, kind of seeing how does this work out in people's lives? And of course, what is it going to take to repair? So we had an initial push last year, but it did not break into the masses. And that was really disappointing to me. So I was very, very disappointed about that. And I can't even say exactly why that was, except for the fact that it was the launch of the book was really constrained to online since we were also at the peak of COVID at that time, um, or coming down from the peak of COVID. And so we just made a decision not to have live events. I only did 2 live events in the course of a month, and that would normally not be the case. And wherever I've done live events, we've actually sold a lot of books and people have said, I'm going to read this. So thankfully, I feel like this year is like a round 2. I didn't even plan for that, but it just turns out people are now kind of taking a second look at the book and asking me to come and speak on it. And so in a couple of weeks, actually this weekend, I'll be ironically speaking on the Very Good Gospel at Theo Ed Talks in Texas. I think it's in Houston. I don't even know where I'm going. No, Austin.
Austin, I think. Yeah.
Austin, yeah, sorry. So Austin, Texas, and I'm really excited for that. That's a huge honor, and it's an opportunity to get that baseline theology into the masses. From there, I'll be traveling up to Calvin College and then to San Francisco to speak on fortune. And then fortune again at the Proctor Conference, which I'm so excited about. It's an incredible like ingathering of many of the justice-based African-American clergy in the country. They come together once a year at this conference, and it's going to be in Atlanta this year. And the whole point of the conference is looking at where legacy and the future meet. So Fortune just fits right in with that theme, and they asked me to come and speak on it. So, and my publisher has actually offered to give every person there a free copy of the book. So if they
Whoa,
already have it, I know, right? So it's like, and it's
that's
a big
awesome.
deal. It's a lot of people. So hopefully that'll begin to get it out into the Black church in a way that it was only able to make it, to like the first level with the way that we were able to do our launch last year. So you can pray, please pray for us. I strongly believe still that the way for us to heal this nation is through an intentional move, particularly based in the church, toward truth seeking, truth listening, and truth telling. And that the church really needs to be the entity that begins to lead the way on reparation as well. And that is not to decide how the repair happens, but it's to begin to have the conversations between the communities so that the Black community, the African American community can say to the churches in their city, this is what it would take for things to be made well for us, and the churches to take up that cause together, both on a local level and also as on an institutional level, for churches to own their part in the demise of people of African descent in this nation over time, and to repair that, to repair the relationship most of all.
Amen.
So yeah, yeah.
Well, I mean, your books are what I would call prophetic. And, a lot of times people are not ready. The general public is not ready for hearing something prophetic. And it's not just your books. I've seen this with, several of the other social justice or leading edge, related authors that I work with. That's the bad news. The good news is that means a lot of times there's a long tail. Right?
Yes.
People will catch up. The rest of this world will catch up with the thinking that those of you that are ahead of the rest of us, are making and doing and writing about. So I've
That's
seen
encouraging. Thank
Oh,
you.
no, I've seen that time and time again. I mean, even, go back to Buechner. I mean, a lot of the world wasn't ready for the stuff he wrote in the 70s and the 80s and finally catching up now. I mean, and like I said, several of the other authors that are coming out with books now, I feel are in a similar kind of situation where, they're saying things that need to be heard, but people aren't necessarily wanting to hear that. They're not ready.
They're not ready. I mean, one thing that I was blown away by when I went to Europe, while in Amsterdam, and it wasn't just Amsterdam. It was this, of course, the seminary brings people from all across the world, but especially they're really focused on Europe and Eurasia. And so I was shocked, just shocked that their conversation there literally does not include the word colonization. It's just not a part of their conversation. And yet for us in the US, especially since George Floyd, there's become a normative understanding that our history of being colonized by England and then the continuation of colonization of Black bodies and lives and Native American people, that is something that is influencing the right now, the present. And since George Floyd, that's become very clear. There have been a lot of people teaching and speaking on this. There have been a lot of people, but the funny thing is most of that has been happening online. It's been happening in spaces like TikTok and in Instagram, ironically. And that's where a lot of your prophetic voices are moving this understanding forward. But in the academy seems it really hasn't made that wormhole lurch forward that we were all brought forward in through George Floyd, they're still catching up. And Europe in particular never got it. They just didn't, they never got that. So I know I was really struck because they are the colonizers. They're the ones who did it. And they do not think of, for example, Ukraine is not understood to be a colonizing act by Russia right now. What? What? They just think of it as a war. They don't think of their wars as being acts of colonization, but they are. And so anyway, so I'm struck by that, and I'm also struck by the reality that there were a lot of Americans in that international space speaking into that. So it feels like, God, like I said, God is just seriously doing something right now. There's a major shift on the horizon, and it feels like God is moving pieces into place.
Yay. Yay.
Yeah.
So for those of us who want to be a good ally of racial justice work, what suggestions do you have?
Well, I mean, I think that first of all, continue to do your own homework, continue to do your reading, continue to have your reading groups, continue to dive into the scripture actually, and to learn what it looks like to decolonize your read of the text. Continue to do all those things, and then go further. Then begin to ask the question of your own life and your own family story. Last year, I think in our conversation, certainly in others, I really pushed the idea that it's actually part of our work, part of the work of healing is going to require genealogical work by white people, that people of European descent have to begin to understand themselves as simply human, not as white, because whiteness has no root. It has no history. It's just a political construct that says you rule. That's literally the reason it was developed, was to say you rule. So as much as you identify as white, and I don't mean owning the responsibility of whiteness in our society, and even your own whiteness for the pain of others and the oppression of others. I don't mean that. What I mean is, and as much as you claim that unrepentantly and hail it in that way, when you do that, what you're doing is you are dehumanizing yourself. You are participating in the disconnection of yourselves from your own history, from your own family's story, from your own people's struggles. Part of the reason why I think Europeans don't use that word colonization. It was funny because one of my professors actually said this to me when we were going at it, and she's from London, and she's like, but she really wasn't understanding why I was so irate, at this one in this one section of our conversation. It's not irate, but like I was just like really bothered. And she said, how do you think colonization has survived all this time? It does it by refusing to speak the words, by refusing to see itself and covering itself to others, right? And making itself invisible, and invisible power in the room. And so what it will take for people of European descent is to go back into your own story and realize the ways that you too were colonized.
How many of those folks are familiar with the doctrine of discovery, or the other papal edicts that were made in the 1500s, 1600s, whatever?
Yeah, right. You would think, but actually, and this is what my professor would have said is, and what she did say is that, and the one from London, she said, we understand the work that we did outside of ourselves, the colonizing that we did outside of ourselves, the big C colonizing. We see that as colonization, but we don't see our internal struggles as acts of colonization. Nor would she. She's from London. She's from the place that did it. Like, it's called the United Kingdom of Britain for a reason, right? So Wales is its own nation colonized by Britain. Scotland is its own nation colonized by Britain. Northern Ireland is its own nation colonized by Britain, right? So, but British don't see that. They just see the UK. This is the United Kingdom. This is the way it's supposed to be.
Sun never sets in the British Empire, right?
Yeah, right,
It's still
right.
their way of thinking.
Yeah, well, but and it doesn't even have to set. It's right around them. It's literally on their very same island.
Yeah.
So that's the that's the that's the deal.
We humans have a long ways to go, don't we?
Yeah.
So let's look forward a little bit. Are there any, I mean, I know you're getting a doctorate, so that's going to consume quite a bit of your time, but are there any other books or projects or anything that you can talk about yet?
No, I'm not. Well, projects, sure. I think I told you about the institution.
Yes, yes.
Well, truth telling, that's exciting. There's a possible project with megachurch pastors that are also going to be engaging in really kind of just in racial equity boot camp. They're going to kind of get on the same page about what is this stuff. And so we're going to be working with 15 white, 15 black megachurch pastors later on this year and possibly into 2024. We are revamping our institute actually, and I want to encourage everybody there, everyone here. I think another way actually that you can move forward, forgive me, to answer your previous question, in being an ally, an accomplice really, in the work of building a just world, is to become trained and then to engage in the work of faith-rooted organizing. So I say that because I'm reminded that our institute has a webinar series, an 8 episode webinar series that on faith-rooted organizing that is honestly, I think, the very best training you will ever get on organizing, on community organizing from a faith-rooted space. It is led by Reverend Dr. Alexia Salvatierra, who wrote the book Faith-Rooted Organizing, and me. And so, you know, Dr. Salvatierra actually was one of the first people to actually train me. I had already been doing it for a year, but then I did her training and I was like, oh my gosh, there's language for this stuff that we're doing, right? So, and then since then, we've done a lot of training together, even together in South Africa and other places. So I would really, oh, and also Brazil as well. So we did an online training for Brazilians in the middle of COVID. And that was kind of, or no, just before COVID in 2020, 2019. It's really amazing. So I want to encourage you to please go to Freedom Road. In fact, what I can do, if I can find it here now, I'll put the link to that training.
Okay, good. Yeah, I was going to ask where we could find it.
Yeah. Put the link to the training in the chat so you can access it easily.
And for those that don't know, Dr. Salvatierra was also one of the contributors to one of the How to Heal Our Divides books.
Oh, very good. Of course, right?
Yep.
That's great. That's wonderful. So, okay, I have it. I'm now putting it into the chat. And I really do hope that each of you will download. This is a webinar series that we did last year, and it was phenomenal. And now it's being offered in a on-demand structure. And it's actually very, very cheap compared to the original cost. So, and what it's worth.
That's excellent. Very, excuse me, very good to know. So, excuse me, I'm fighting cold still. Mm-hmm. So, any last thoughts, Lisa, that you'd like to leave us with before we let you go?
Oh, well, thank you. I mean, I just wanted to say, first of all, thank you to everyone who showed up today. And I realize, you know, I know how it is to be on a webinar and to keep your camera off because you're like, I'm not in the space to be seen today. I want to thank you for showing up anyway. I appreciate that. And also thank you for being a part of the struggle. I trust, thank you, Danielle. I see you. You know, I know that, you know, if you're in this space, most likely you're part of the struggle in your local area and in your network. And I just want to thank you for being a part of that struggle. As people of faith, it's actually a core part of our faith to protect the image of God on earth in every corner of it, in every corner of the earth. And one of the things that I was struck by in when I was in Amsterdam is thinking right now about what it means to be human. And I think that that is really kind of, in my book anyway, it's the next frontier. I have spoken a lot about this in the Very Good Gospel, also in Fortune, that on the first page of the Bible, in the first chapter, we see very clearly that all humanity is made in the image of God. And that is a pre-modern text. It's a pre-enlightenment text. It is a ancient text written by brown people in a brown context that is colonized in the moment that they are writing. And so we know that the ones who wrote that text understood and were declaring, I too am human. I too am called and created to be to exercise dominion in the world, to exercise stewardship of the world. But unfortunately, in the Enlightenment era, when European philosophers were determining who is human, they only saw themselves as human. And that actually goes right back to the Greek philosophers as well. They only saw themselves as fully human. And in fact, male, able-bodied, and people who were white. And so if we look around at our world today and we hear the cries for people to be seen as human, that's why. Because we've grown up in a matrix that has told us that only white men who are able-bodied are fully and cisgendered and, straight, all the things. They are the only full humans. And the first page of the Bible counters that and came before. It was written before those biases were written into Western philosophy. So part of what it means to be a Jesus follower is to renounce the lie of select humanity, of hierarchies of humanity. And I answer the cry of Benjamin Crump yesterday in Tyree Nichols' incredibly powerful and beautiful homegoing, when he said, why couldn't those Black officers see Tyree as human? And he repeated that 3 or 4 times. Why couldn't they see him as human? Why couldn't they see him as human? Well, the reason why is because we have been soaking in the matrix that has taught us not to see him as human, all of us. And so the work really, truly is the work of washing our eyes clean of that matrix so that we can see each other as made in the image of God and all that that means. Thank you.
Well, Lisa, that's a very good lead into our next month's discussion, with Lamar Hardwick, whose nickname is Autism Pastor. He's doing a lot of research on the intersectionality between racism and ableism. Mm-hmm. And so that'll be a really great conversation with him, as well. Thank you so much, Lisa, for all the wonderful work that you do and for sharing it with us today and joining us, and wish you all the best for everything that you're moving forward with.
Appreciate that so much, Brian. And again, wonderful to be with everybody. Keep up the fight. Keep getting into good trouble. Okay?
Thanks so much, everyone. Hope to see you next month.
Bye-bye.
Bye for now.